Welcome back to the deep dive, where we dive deep.
Into all that juicy research.
Exactly. And today,
We've got a special request.
yeah, we're taking a request from the Golden Scarab, who wrote in about Waldorf education.
Interesting choice.
I know, right? It's not your typical school system.
No, not at all.
So we're going to try to unpack it a bit.
Really break it down.
From its philosophy all the way to what it looks like in a classroom.
The whole 9 yards.
So to start, Waldorf education aims to...
Well, it wants to do a lot.
Yeah.
But mainly, it's all about cultivating not just academics, not just the head stuff, but also creativity, emotional intelligence, individuality.
Big task.
Huge,
Yeah.
especially in our tech-saturated world,
Absolutely. And that's what makes this deep dive even more fascinating.
Definitely.
So let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
This approach, where does it even come from?
Right to the source.
You sent over some info about Rudolf Steiner, the founder.
Yeah.
He seems like quite a character.
Oh, he was a fascinating guy, an Austrian philosopher.
Uh-huh.
And he developed this whole system of thought called anthroposophy.
Anthroposophy.
Try saying that 5 times fast.
I don't even want to try once.
It's a mouthful, I know. But think of it as like this lens, a way to understand the spiritual side of humanity and the cosmos,
Okay.
It's complex, but basically it sees us humans as these multi-layered beings
Okay.
with a physical side,
Right.
emotional, and even spiritual.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty deep stuff.
So how does a philosophy like that, how does it become an education system?
That's the cool part. See, Steiner believed that education should address the whole child, not just their intellect.
Makes sense.
Right. He felt that traditional education often missed the mark.
Yeah.
It neglected creativity, imagination, those hands-on skills.
So he created Waldorf to kind of fill those gaps.
Exactly. He wanted to nurture those aspects alongside the academic learning.
I'm already intrigued, and I know the Golden Scarab specifically mentioned being interested in how Waldorf fosters creativity.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So can you give us like a real-world example? How does that actually play out in a Waldorf school?
Okay, so picture this. A classroom where art isn't just a separate subject, It's woven into everything they do.
Okay.
So imagine they're learning about ancient civilizations.
Right.
But instead of just reading about it, they're creating clay models or acting out historical events, even writing and performing their own plays.
Wow.
It's all about engaging their imaginations and letting them experience learning in a way that, speaks to all their senses.
I love that. It sounds very hands-on, which aligns with Steiner's whole child emphasis.
Exactly. It all ties back to that.
But something you mentioned earlier about anthroposophy.
Yeah.
It's seeing a spiritual dimension in us.
Right.
Does that mean Waldorf education has like a religious affiliation?
Good question. And it's something that comes up a lot. So it's important to be clear, Waldorf education isn't tied to any specific religion.
Okay.
While Steiner's philosophy does have spiritual elements, they're presented in a way that's, open to interpretation.
Right.
It respects individual beliefs.
Yeah.
The focus is really on fostering a sense of wonder, a reverence for the world.
Yeah.
Not on indoctrinating anyone into any particular dogma.
Gotcha. So it's more about cultivating a sense of awe and connection with the world around them.
That's it.
And, thinking about that, one thing that really stood out in the research was Steiner's view on technology.
No.
Particularly his belief that face-to-face interaction is so crucial for child development.
Makes sense.
Right. And it's so interesting to see how some of his ideas, they actually line up with modern research on screen time.
Totally. Like that Sapien Labs study you sent over?
Yes.
Remember, it found a link between, increased screen time in early childhood and negative mental well-being outcomes later on as young adults.
It's pretty powerful.
It is. And when you think about how Waldorf emphasizes limiting screen time.
Especially in those early years.
Right. It really makes you wonder if they're onto something, in terms of promoting healthy social and emotional development.
Yeah.
It's something to consider for sure.
Absolutely. And speaking of early childhood,
The foundation.
I know a lot of parents are curious about how these Waldorf principles actually play out in those really formative years.
Yeah.
Like, what does a Waldorf kindergarten even look like?
Okay, so imagine a space filled with natural materials.
Right.
Wooden toys, tons of opportunities for imaginative play.
Sounds peaceful already.
It is. You won't find any flashing screens or plastic gadgets.
Nope.
Instead, you'll see kids building forts, making up stories, playing dress-up, engaging in activities that really nurture their creativity and social skills,
I can picture it. It almost feels like stepping back in time to a simpler time, which honestly, I think appeals to a lot of parents,
Oh,
especially those who are worried about, like, the overstimulation and tech overload that kids face these days.
yeah, it's a valid concern.
For sure.
But Waldorf isn't just about nostalgia.
Right.
It's rooted in this deep understanding of child development.
Okay.
They believe that young children learn best through imitation and hands-on experiences.
So play is crucial.
Exactly. It's not just fun and games, it's the heart of the curriculum.
Love it. So we talked about those early years,
Lots of play, lots of imagination.
Exactly. But what happens when they move on, like into elementary school?
Good question.
Does it become more, I don't know,
Structured?
yeah, more structured, more academic?
It's a gradual shift, for sure.
Okay.
Waldorf elementary schools, usually for kids between 7 and 14,
Okay.
they still emphasize the arts,
Good.
but academics are definitely more integrated.
Integrate.
Like woven in. Imagine learning history through like dramatic reenactments.
Oh, wow.
Or studying fractions by baking bread.
Okay, now that's a math class I could get behind.
Right.
It sounds like they're finding all these creative ways to engage kids with subjects that, let's be honest, can be a little dry sometimes.
It's all about making it come alive.
Exactly. And speaking of engaging kids,
Yeah.
I'm really curious about this main lesson block you mentioned before.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds pretty unique.
It is. It is.
So tell me more.
Instead of jumping between different subjects every hour,
Yeah.
they dedicate a big chunk of the morning to one subject
Okay.
for like a whole month.
Wow, a whole month.
A whole month.
Okay.
So let's say they're studying, I don't know, ancient Rome.
Okay. Ancient Rome.
They wouldn't just read about it in a textbook.
No.
They might build models of Roman architecture or write and perform plays set in that time period,
Oh, wow.
learn Roman songs, even create their own Roman-inspired artwork.
It's like total immersion.
Exactly. It's about really immersing themselves in the topic
Yeah.
and exploring it from all these different angles,
I love that. It makes so much sense. It lets them go deep, make real connections.
rather than just skimming the surface.
Totally. But how do they assess learning in this kind of environment? I mean, standardized tests don't really seem like they'd fit, do they?
You're right. Standardized testing is generally avoided, at least until those college entrance exams in high school.
Okay.
Instead, teachers provide these detailed qualitative reports,
Okay.
almost like narrative describing each student's progress.
So instead of just a letter grade,
Right.
you get a much richer picture of how the child is actually learning and growing.
Exactly. They might include examples of the student's work, observations from the teacher, even input from the student themselves.
Wow, that's really holistic.
It's all about understanding the whole child, remember?
Right, right. It sounds like there's a lot of emphasis on individualization, really getting to know each student.
Absolutely.
And what about the teacher's role in all of this? I mean, they must be pretty amazing to guide this kind of learning journey.
Oh, Waldorf teachers, they're special. They're more than just instructors, they're mentors who accompany the students throughout their whole education.
That's a big responsibility.
It is, but they're given a lot of autonomy in the classroom, so they can really tailor their teaching to each child's individual needs.
It makes you wonder if this approach might be especially helpful for children with special needs.
Interesting point.
I know the Golden Scarab was curious about that.
Yeah.
Do Waldorf schools do a good job of accommodating different learning styles and challenges?
They do, and there's actually some great research on this.
Oh, tell me more.
For example, the T.E. Matthews Community School in California,
Okay.
they work with at-risk youth, many with learning disabilities,
Okay.
and they transitioned to using Waldorf methods, and they saw amazing results.
Really?
Students were more positive about learning.
Wow.
They interacted better with each other,
That's great.
and they even made significant academic progress.
And you said the arts played a big role in that.
Absolutely. The arts were key to their success.
That makes sense, especially when you consider how Waldorf emphasizes creativity and hands-on learning.
Exactly.
It might just provide a more accessible way to learn for those who don't thrive in a traditional classroom.
It can be a game changer for some kids.
Now, I know Waldorf often gets compared to the Montessori method.
Yes. Another popular alternative.
Right, right. So what are some of the key similarities and differences between the two?
Well, both Waldorf and Montessori really value hands-on learning,
Oh.
individualized pacing, and that child-centered approach, They both create these learning environments designed to meet the child where they're at.
Yeah.
But there are some key distinctions.
Like what?
Well, Waldorf is rooted in Steiner's spiritual philosophy,
Right.
while Montessori is more secular,
Okay.
And Waldorf really embraces fantasy and imagination,
Yeah.
especially in those early years.
Right.
Whereas Montessori is more focused on concrete experiences and practical skills.
So it's kind of like choosing between two different flavors of ice cream.
I like that analogy.
They're both delicious and refreshing, but they have their own distinct profiles.
Exactly. And ultimately, the best choice depends on the individual child and what clicks with their learning style and what aligns with their family's values.
So true. Okay, so we've explored a lot about Waldorf education, but it's important to remember that no educational system is perfect.
Right. There are always pros and cons.
What are some potential drawbacks or concerns that parents should be aware of?
Well, some people criticize Steiner's spiritual views.
Okay.
They find them a little out there, maybe even a little esoteric.
Okay.
And while Waldorf's limited early exposure to technology is often seen as a positive,
Right.
some worry it could put students at a disadvantage later on.
Interesting.
And of course, Waldorf schools tend to be more expensive than traditional public schools.
That's something to consider.
Definitely. Parents need to weigh the pros and cons carefully
Right.
and see if Waldorf truly aligns with their family's values and their goals for their child's education.
For those who are intrigued by what they've heard so far, what are some practical steps they can take to explore Waldorf further?
The best way is to visit a local Waldorf school.
Okay.
See a classroom in action, talk to the teachers, chat with other parents.
Yeah,
That'll give you a real feel for the Waldorf environment.
I bet. It's got to be a much richer experience than just reading about it online.
Definitely. There's nothing like seeing it firsthand.
And if a parent is really serious about considering Waldorf, would you recommend they dive deeper into Steiner's philosophy?
It can be helpful for some people,
Right.
but it's not essential.
What?
There are lots of introductory texts and resources out there that explain the core principles in a way that's easy to understand.
So you don't have to get lost in the weeds.
Exactly. You can start simple,
Okay?
but understanding the why behind the what can definitely deepen your appreciation for the approach.
What about families who are maybe geographically isolated or prefer a more flexible approach? Is Waldorf only available in a traditional school setting? Not at all, actually.
Yeah.
There's a whole world of Waldorf-inspired homeschooling resources.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how adaptable the approach is.
So you can go all in with a Waldorf school
You can pick and choose just the elements that really resonate with you.
and kind of weave them into your child's learning at home.
Exactly. You have options.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive into Waldorf education.
It's been fun, right?
What stands out to you as the most compelling part?
That's a good question. For me, it's that focus on nurturing the whole child.
Head, heart, and hands.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
recognizing that education is so much more than just academics. It's
Right.
about creativity, emotional intelligence, practical skill, all those qualities that are so essential for navigating our world.
It's funny, even some tech industry parents are choosing Waldorf for their kids.
I know, right? It's like,
It's like they're recognizing that technology, while important, shouldn't dominate a child's early years.
totally. It's like acknowledging that there's a time and a place for everything.
Right.
And childhood should be a time for exploration, imagination, genuine human connection.
Makes you wonder if there are ways to bring some of these Waldorf principles into mainstream education.
Now, that's an interesting thought.
Could we make classrooms more engaging, more creative, more in tune with the needs of the whole child?
That's a question worth pondering for sure. Could incorporating things like art, storytelling, nature from the Waldorf approach enhance creativity and emotional well-being for all children?
That's a powerful idea, right?
It is food for thought.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. And for anyone listening who wants to explore these alternative education approaches even further, we highly recommend checking out kairosclan.com.
Yeah, they've got a ton of resources on Waldorf education, Montessori homeschooling, all sorts of innovative learning models.
It's a fantastic resource for parents who are looking for something a little different than the traditional classroom.
Definitely worth a visit.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Waldorf education.
Hope you enjoyed it.
We had a blast, and we hope you found it as fascinating and insightful as we did. Until next time, keep those minds curious.